service design in business. And joining us is Leanne Munyori, who is a service designer at Marathon XP. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
Yes. And now, when you look at service design in business, first of all, let us even start with the name itself. Just define for us what service design is all about in business.
Okay, so I know the words separately mean, they make sense to people, but what service design is basically making services better. And anything can be looked at as a service. So a product, when we buy a house, you're not buying a house, you're buying housing. Accommodation, basically. Yes. So even with things like when you go to buy a cup of coffee, you're not necessarily buying the product, which is coffee, but everything else that comes with it. The brand, how the staff remembers your name if you're a regular there. So it's an entire experience. And what service design does in a nutshell is creating experiences that are exceptional. Mm-hmm. And that is what we associate with a business.
All right. And now as you have explained,
yes.
When you look at a coffee mug, when you look at a house, when you look at anything that you're buying or getting a service from, mm-hmm. it needs to be in a certain way.
Yes.
So when you look at very many of the products that we have in Kenya or the businesses that we have, first of all, how a product looks and
yes.
how a business looks. Is there a difference? And just explain to us how a product is supposed to be and also how a business, because when you talk about a business, you're talking about an establishment, you're talking about a whole big company. But now a product, it's a specific thing. So yes. Give us the differences when it comes to a product and also how a business needs to look.
All right. So one thing, when it comes to service design, it's very people-centered. So people here are the customers, people who are buying from your business, and it also looks at the employees because they're the champions of your business. So those are the two main, the main anchor of service design when it comes to business and products is people. Now, people, now looking at it from a very behavioral point of view, are not as rational as we may think. So businesses think about their products very rationally. If we sell this, people will buy it. But people rarely buy a thing. They buy what the thing does for them. So it can be functionally, it can be emotionally, it can be in terms of socially, it can be socially. So I want to buy a Mercedes because it gives me a certain status in the society, or a Prado because people will just move, especially if I add the blue and red lights onto it. Or when I buy Ketepa instead of another brand, is it because it's been there for long and it's something that I attach sentiment to it? Because when guests used to come, all the cutlery that is usually in a cabinet somewhere will come out. So we attach emotion to our purchases. And so when businesses start to think of users as just people, right? They want to impress a girlfriend or a wife. They want to make their kids feel proud or appreciated because they did well in their exams. Then they shift how they're selling their products, mm-hmm. right? And that's what service design does. We look at all those different aspects that are mostly intangible, but then translate into profit margins mm-hmm. over a period of time, especially, and the other thing is that it's constantly iterative. So the 5-year plan might be obsolete even before the 5 years are there. So it's something that businesses need to be aware of and look at it, look at the trends that are happening, and that's why data is now really big, right? And data analysts are becoming more marketable, but service design takes into account even those processes. So what yes. other processes are included and what props? So what tools are you using to accomplish whatever the business outcome is? Mm-hmm. But at the anchor of it, it comes down to people.
Okay.
Yes.
So you're basically saying when you're setting up a business, mm-hmm. you need to think about who you're serving.
Yes.
Yes. Because many a times when someone sets up a business or an enterprise or an SME, they usually think about, okay, what am I going to get out of this?
Yes.
Because you open up a shop, you want to see, okay, at the end of the month, what will the profit be? But you're not thinking about the person that is going to be served by the particular business. Mm-hmm. All right. And now let's also look at someone who's starting maybe a startup. They want to set up a business. And what are some of the nitty-gritties when it comes to the colors, when it comes to how the location of the particular startup? Do this also contribute into service design?
Yes, branding and brand image is a big part of that. As we said, people don't necessarily buy a product. They buy also everything else that comes with the product, including the location. So there are people who might choose to go way further for a product or to engage with a particular business because there's something that they get there that they don't get at a location that's close to them. So as you said, other than just what am I getting, it's what am I giving? Am I supplying, am I meeting people's needs? And who is that person? So even as a startup, I know there's a tendency to say, but everyone needs my product. You know, so if we have so many brands, water brands. So how come they're still all in the market? There must be something that one brand is meeting for a particular segment of people that the others don't.
Yes.
Is it the ergonomics of the bottle? Is it the color? Is it the packaging? Is it, you know, so it's, even as a startup, it's better to look at your product in terms of one person. Am I talking to one person? And then many people feel like they're all being spoken to at an individual level. Then it's such a broad messaging or target that I feel, someone else will. And then everyone is thinking, someone else will take up that. So the more particular or, and that's where things like, we use tools such as personas. And I know that there is some contention and some designers might come after me for that, but it's important because it gives you, it puts an image, a face to the person that you're trying to sell to. And that helps to personalize your product and structure your business in a way that there will be longevity.
All right, and you've actually mentioned what I was about to ask. When it comes to a product,
yes,
and you have all these people who usually are used to advertise the product, and maybe sometimes the buyers don't really relate with a person who has been put there.
Yeah.
So when we set a product before buyers and
Yes,
on into the market, what is it that we need to do in order for us at least to get to even that person who doesn't have access to this, but they can really make sure that they come to get the product?
All right, so research is a big part of what we do at Marathon XP. And because we can come into a market with assumptions that people will do this, people will buy, they'll fly off the shelf. But then it's important to have a track record. So keep data, keep talking to your customers, and keep listening. Because sometimes you don't even have to ask them questions, but people will say things about your product or your service. And most of the time, it's even a service. So you can, there are places where people are return customers, not necessarily because the product is good, but because the service is amazing. And that's where service design comes in. So you can have an average cup of tea, but because when you come in, someone remembers your name and they remember the booth that you sit in and they tell you, you know what, it's actually clean. How about I set you up there? You're like, you know what, I feel like family here. And so you keep coming back and you bring other people. And we know as Kenyans, word of mouth travels really fast.
Yeah,
so
that's true.
Yes. So your business then grows organically, as most marketers will tell you. You need to grow your business organically. And that's one of the tricks of the trade. So just, it's about people.
Yes.
And we also have a saying about, I've had this, that people don't leave businesses, they leave people. Right? So it's that interaction, that rapport that you create with people. But most importantly, now to come back to your question, research. You can have assumptions, but you need to now figure out the truth about why are people not buying, or what exactly about my product is actually selling, so that I can either double down on that or figure a way to find more opportunities out of that thing that is giving, that is stable in my business. Yes.
All right. Also, let's move on and look at an employer who's, a business owner who has employed people in his or her company, and as you've mentioned about service, does he or she need to make sure that at least every employer that is employed there is of a certain character? Because at the end of the day, you go into an establishment, from even the entrance, you just feel like there's something wrong. So as a person who owns an enterprise or a business, what is it that you need to do when you're employing people in your company?
So that's the second P. We said people and processes. So processes is the next layer. What is your recruitment criteria? Because if you have someone who is competent, but then on the other hand, they're not passionate, or at least has minimal passion to kind of grow in that in the role that they're in, then it becomes a bit of a challenge. The dissatisfaction is there, and even how they sell the product. You can tell when someone believes in a product, right? And they're not just trying to make a sale. That if you ask them a question, they're not trying to manage you with an answer because that's what was in the handbook. They can actually tell you even examples, and the humanity that comes with that answer is what will then help grow that business. Maybe even when they're talking to other people, they'll be, I want to work in that company. Because the way people, the job satisfaction, we've heard a lot about toxic work environments, and sometimes it's not even the hierarchy that's there or the bosses. It's just that there are certain things that are not aligned, because I don't believe in the company. Someone was brought in because they are related to someone else, and even though that usually can be a trend, as long as the person can be held accountable, then the dynamics change completely, right? Because it means if a complaint is brought forward, it can be reviewed logically rather than with other kind of lenses on. And so the recruitment is very key, knowing that some of their interests are aligned. You can be, let's even talk about journalism. You can be a journalist whose interest is in business rather than in investigation, right? So placing you in the right department means that even your productivity, your enthusiasm is much, much higher. So you're right. The type of people that you recruit and how the employee journey. So is there room for them to grow? What does that look like? How are the reviews? Is there a sort of structure of how they will be reviewed in order to have an objective way, so that we're not guessing? It's not just a guessing game. Someone doesn't have pictures on a wall and wherever the dart lands, that's the person we are promoting. No. So it's more open and transparent, which is I know a term that we use a lot when calm election cycle, but I think it's something that we can practice in our daily lives, especially in business.
Right. Thank you so much for really elaborating that. You had mentioned about some P's. Is that the third one?
Oh, so the third, we say, so people, processes, and props.
Yes.
So the tools that you use. In this case, I know, like in your profession, we have the cameras, and I'm sure somewhere someone has a soundboard. And so in our case, we use things like now the customer journey mapping, but that's just a tool. It's not necessarily the outcome. So depending on what outcome you want to have, do you want to reduce the churn rate? So churn rate here is the number of customers that are stopping to use your service or are not buying your products.
Yes.
Back to employment, it's the number of turnover that you're having for your employees. Is it very high, which means it's impacting on your bottom line because you have to retrain people and that takes time. So we use a number of tools, and also the tools that the businesses who seek out our services use, we can also refine that. Yes.
Right. And now let's look at a business that is
fictional business. Okay.
A business. Let's
okay.
just look at a fictional business
yes.
that we say the service design is 100%. First of all, do we have a service design that is 100% in a business? And how can this fictional business that we are looking at have 100% service design?
Wow. Okay. I have not come across any studies that show a business that has 100% service design integrated, but it is a growing practice. Most of there are a few businesses that have internal service designers, but most of the time they outsource that service. And so for 100% service designing, so with that, if a company, our fictional company, so that's employing service design, it needs to break down the silos, because most businesses will marketing will work on something and then exit it out to someone else, or production and operations. And so that sometimes usually causes conflict within how the business is operating. But it could be broken down if people worked in collaboration a bit more, right? We all have the same outcome.
Yes.
The value and the mission of the company is the same. So how can we make that process more smoother? How can whatever I do complement what you do, rather than it being, you didn't do what you needed to do, and so I didn't do what I needed to do. So how can we break down those walls, or at least have a more permeable departments? Yes.
Okay. Right. Even as we are now getting into the end of this conversation.
Okay.
Are you hoping for the end?
It came as a shock.
Okay. So, when you look at structure of businesses in Kenya, and especially Kenya and also the still developing countries and the developing economies, what are some of the gaps when it comes to a design of a business that are making us not maybe reach the level of maybe the already developed countries where businesses are doing very well?
Wow. Okay. That is quite a heavy question. I think I'd first like to start by saying there are industries that are taking into account the quality of services that a lot of Kenyans are now experiencing, especially because we're traveling a bit more. And so we've been exposed to a different quality of service. And so out of that, customers are demanding more. And with how vocal we can get on social media platforms, it means some companies then are more quicker, or rather, are quicker to respond positively to that. So they don't see it necessarily as a bad thing. They see it as an opportunity to improve their services, right? And the banking sector, I would say, is among those, is within that industry. We've worked with a number of them, and from their card services to their in-branch experience to even their websites, right? So how can you accomplish certain tasks just on a website? And out of that, I would say that what is probably holding us back, and now this is not pegged on any industry in specific, is now how we take feedback, right? So the way we hear it and the way we respond to it are two different things. So and even just observation. So I'll take an example of a restaurant. When you go in and you're seated there for 30 minutes before a menu comes to you, and when the menu is placed in front of you, the lady or the guy just places it and, do you want anything? It's as though you've come into their kitchen.
Yes.
And you aren't invited. So it's the floor manager to note those things, so that even as they're debriefing, either before a shift or after a shift, those things can keep on improving, so that the next day, I'm not experiencing the same challenge. Because the other thing is that majority of the people do not raise any concerns. If I'm unhappy with the service, I just won't show up the next time. I will not endure, I will not tolerate, because I'm paying, right? And people have worked hard for their money. So they're like, I'll go spend it where I feel appreciated, or where my money feels like it's buying me value. And so other than just listening, I think we need to observe. Just look at people, see how how they're acting, because what we say and what we do are two different things. So I think that's the gap that we have, listening and watching.
Okay, so we need to listen more and observe.
Yes.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having
me. On this
me.
discussion on service design in business. I hope you got to understand something little from Leanne Munyori, or even a lot. All right. We've come to the end of this conversation right here on Business Day. My name is Kelvin Yakundi. Stick around. Be Your KTN is coming up next.